Before we dive in, tell me where you're listening from and what pulled you into this story. If it spoke to you, drop a comment. Your words help keep history's forgotten voices alive. The palace is quiet in the way only power knows how to be quiet. Beyond the marble courtyards and tiled corridors of Topkapi, beyond the guards and the call to prayer, drifting over the Bosphorus, the most powerful man on earth is listening to a woman history insists should not matter. She is not born royal, she is not Muslim by birth, she is not even free. And yet, when Sultan Suleiman makes decisions that bend the Ottoman Empire's future, her voice is in the room. You have been told this story before, but always as a warning. They call her ROXELANA, they call her Hurrem, they call her seductress, witch, corrupter of princes, destroyer of tradition. They write her as a scandal in silk. But scandals don't reshape empires, power does. And this is the story of how a girl stolen from her home became the most dangerous woman the Ottoman world ever produced. So dangerous that every historian with a pen sharpened it against her. Before she was hated by everyone with a quill, she was just a girl who learned the first rule of survival. If you cannot escape the system, learn how to run it from the inside. ROXELANA. The woman the Ottoman Empire tried to erase. Slave, Empress, heretic, architect of an empire. Before the harem, a girl taken. You don't begin life planning to become a legend. You begin it in a village where the days are measured by bells and seasons, where faith is simple, where danger feels far away, until it isn't. She is born sometime around the year 1500 in Ruthenia, in what is now Ukraine. The daughter of an Orthodox priest. A girl raised in a world of icons and hymns, wood smoke and winter. She has a name then one history will not bother to preserve properly. Names matter only if you survive long enough for someone powerful to repeat them. She is clever, people notice. The kind of clever that laughs easily, that watches before speaking, that understands tone before words. It will save her life later. Because one day the men arrive. The Crimean Tatars raid without warning. Villages burn fast. Children scatter faster. You run if you can, you hide if you can't. And if you are unlucky, if your timing is wrong by a heartbeat, you are taken. There is no trial, no explanation, no mercy in the logistics of slavery. She is dragged from her world into a column of bodies moving south, toward the Black Sea, toward markets where human beings are weighed and priced like grain. This is how empires feed themselves, not with cruelty for its own sake, but with efficiency. Here is where history often flinches. It skips the march, it skips the hunger, it skips the knowledge settling in your chest that no one is coming to rescue you. She survives it anyway, not by fighting, fight gets you killed, but by adapting, by watching, by understanding that fear makes people careless, and carelessness creates opportunity. She learns languages quickly, she learns faces, she learns who to smile at and who to avoid. When she is sold, she is renamed. This matters more than it sounds. To rename someone is to tell them their past is irrelevant, to inform them that memory is now a liability. She becomes Hurrem, the laughing one, a name chosen not for truth but for utility. A girl who smiles is less threatening. A girl who laughs is underestimated. She will make that mistake very expensive. She is sent not to a mine or a field, but to the Ottoman imperial harem. And if you imagine cushions and perfumes and idle luxury, you already misunderstand what she has walked into. The harem is not a pleasure palace. It is a political engine. It is a training ground for women whose bodies are currency and whose survival depends on understanding power faster than the men who think they own it. It is watched constantly. Punishments are quiet. Ambition is lethal if mishandled. Most women here vanish. A few endure. And one will change everything. Hurrem steps into the harem as a slave with no allies, no lineage, no protection, only a mind that refuses to go dark. She does not yet know the name Suleiman. She does not yet know the rules she is about to break. But even now, even at the bottom rung of the most dangerous ladder in the empire, she understands something instinctively. If you are going to be trapped, you might as well learn who holds the keys. And she starts watching, carefully. The harem is not a cage, it is a weapon. The first mistake people make about the Ottoman harem is assuming it exists for pleasure. It doesn't. It exists for control. Every woman inside it is inventory and investment at the same time. Catalogued, trained, tested, discarded if necessary. The harem feeds the dynasty with heirs, alliances, leverage. It is closer to a political academy than a brothel, and far more dangerous than either. Hürrem learns this quickly. She is bathed, dressed, instructed, taught Ottoman Turkish, taught court etiquette, taught when to lower her eyes and when not to. She is taught how to walk, how to sit, how to listen without seeming to listen at all. Every gesture is rehearsed because every gesture can be interpreted as ambition, and ambition without protection is a death sentence here. The older women watch her. The eunuchs watch her more closely because there is something off about this girl. She laughs. Not the soft, apologetic laugh of someone trying to disappear, but a sharp, alive laugh, the kind that makes people turn their heads before they decide whether to smile back. It unsettles them. A slave is not supposed to sound like she enjoys being alive. Other girls compete the way they've been taught to: beauty, silence, obedience. They cultivate fragility. They wait. Hürrem does something different. She pays attention. She notices which women are promoted and which are quietly sent away. She notices how favor works, not as romance, but as rhythm. She learns that the Sultan tires of predictability, that mystery holds longer than submission, that men who command empires grow bored of women who only mirror their power instead of challenging it. She also learns the unspoken truth no one will say aloud. The most dangerous woman in the harem is not the most beautiful one. It is the one who understands timing. When she is finally summoned, when her name is spoken, when the doors open and she is led forward, she does not tremble. Inside the chamber sits Suleiman, young, brilliant, already called the lawgiver by those who understand what kind of ruler he will be. He has been raised to command men, armies, history itself. Women approach him like offerings, like ornaments. Hürrem does not. She meets his eyes, not boldly, not submissively, curiously. She speaks when spoken to, but she does not vanish between words. She laughs when something is amusing. She argues lightly when she disagrees. She surprises him, and surprise to a man who rules half the known world is intoxicating. This is the moment the machine stutters, because Suleiman does not dismiss her. He remembers her. He calls for her again, and again the rules begin to bend. But Suleiman is not finished. He marries her. Not symbolically, not quietly, but officially. An Ottoman sultan marrying a former slave is unprecedented. It disrupts the entire political architecture of the empire, because marriage implies legitimacy. It implies permanence. It implies that this woman is not temporary. It implies she is a partner. Hürrem becomes Hürrem Sultan, and the reaction is immediate. The court fractures. Mahidevran is pushed aside. Her son, Mustafa, beloved by the army, groomed as heir, suddenly finds himself vulnerable. Not because Hürrem moves against him directly, but because proximity to power has shifted. This is the cruel truth of dynasties. You don't need to attack someone to endanger them. You only need to exist closer to the throne. Hürrem understands this better than anyone. She begins corresponding with foreign rulers, writing letters to kings and queens in her own voice, advocating for alliances, charity projects, diplomatic restraint. She funds mosques, kitchens, hospitals, not as vanity, but as infrastructure, as legitimacy carved in stone. She builds a public image. This is another rule she breaks. Women of the harem are supposed to be invisible to the outside world. Hürrem makes herself known, carefully, respectably, irreversibly. The people begin to recognize her name. The court begins to fear it, and fear breed stories. They call her manipulative. They call her witch. They call her poison in silk. They say she whispers in Suleiman's ear at night, bending his will, as if emperors are passive instruments, as if power could be stolen by proximity rather than earned by intelligence. They accuse her of orchestrating Mustafa's downfall, of pulling strings from behind screens, of being responsible for blood spilled she never directly touched. Here is where history gets uncomfortable, because Hürrem did not invent the brutality of Ottoman succession. Brothers killing brothers was policy long before she arrived. Princes were executed to prevent civil war. The system was already soaked in blood. Hürrem did not create it. She navigated it. And navigation, when done successfully by a woman, is always rewritten as manipulation. By now she knows the truth no chronicler will admit. If a woman influences outcomes, she will be blamed for them. If she does nothing, she will be erased. Hürrem chooses influence, and she chooses survival for her children. That choice will make her immortal and unforgivable, because she has crossed the final boundary. She is no longer a slave who rose, she is a woman shaping succession. And empires do not forgive women who decide who rules next. The knives are fully drawn now. Not all of them are metal. Most are made of ink. Ink is sharper than steel. By the time Hürrem Sultan understands she has won Suleiman's heart, she also understands something far more dangerous. Love does not protect you in an empire. Only narrative does. And Rome, Constantinople, has always been ruled as much by stories as by armies. The men who resent Hürrem cannot strike her directly. She is legally free, lawfully married, protected by the Sultan himself. To attack her openly would be to challenge Suleiman's judgment, and that is suicide. So they do what men with quills always do when they cannot draw swords. They write. They begin reshaping her into a myth that can survive her. They call her foreign. They emphasize her Christian birth as if conversion were a costume she could shed at will. They describe her laughter as mockery, her intelligence as sorcery, her influence as corruption. They accuse her of changing Suleiman, as if he were not already a conqueror before she arrived, as if his laws, his wars, his executions required her permission. This is the oldest trick in history. When a man rules harshly, he is strong. When a woman stands beside him, she is blamed. Hürrem knows this because she has watched it happen before. To other women, quieter women, women who disappeared cleanly into footnotes. She refuses that fate. Instead of retreating into silence, she becomes more deliberate. She writes letters not just to foreign courts, but to Suleiman himself, letters preserved to this day. In them, she speaks with devotion, yes, but also with clarity. She warns him when his absence leaves Istanbul unstable. She advises restraint when violence would create rebellion. She reminds him, gently and persistently, that empires rot from the inside before they fall to enemies. She does not command, she persuades, and persuasion terrifies men who believe power should only move in straight lines. Meanwhile, the succession crisis grows poisonous. Prince Mustafa remains popular, dangerously so. The army loves him, the people chant his name, and in an empire where popularity can trigger coups, this makes him a liability. Hürrem's sons are younger, less visible, more vulnerable. Here is the truth no storybook wants to admit. If Mustafa survives, Hürrem's children do not. And if Hürrem's children do not survive, neither does she. This is not maternal instinct. It is political math. The decision that follows will stain her name forever. Mustafa is accused of treason. Evidence is thin. Suspicion is thick. Suleiman orders his execution. The empire gasps. The scribes erupt. And the blame crystallizes instantly around one name, Hürrem. They say she orchestrated it, that she poisoned Suleiman's mind, that she engineered the downfall of a beloved prince out of jealousy and ambition. They do not ask whether the system itself made the choice inevitable. They do not ask whether Suleiman, emperor, lawgiver, executioner, acted on his own authority. They need a villain, and Hürrem fits too well. From this moment on, history stops seeing her actions. It sees only her silhouette. She becomes the woman who broke tradition, the wife who replaced concubines, the mother who destroyed a prince. And yet the empire does not collapse. It stabilizes, reforms continue, diplomacy deepens, charitable institutions flourish. The Ottoman state reaches a cultural and administrative height that later generations will call a golden age. Hürrem lives long enough to see her influence secure, but not long enough to defend her reputation. She dies before Suleiman, which means she does not get to write the final chapter. Others will do it for her, and they will not be kind, because there is one unforgivable sin in imperial history. A woman who survives power and leaves evidence that she understood it better than the men who claimed to own it. And Hürrem Sultan leaves evidence everywhere, in stone, in letters, in laws that outlast her body, and in the panic of the men who worked so hard to make sure her story sounded like a warning instead of a lesson. Because if Hürrem was not a seductress, if she was not a witch, then she was something far more frightening, a strategist who learned to win in a world designed for her to lose, and that is a truth no empire likes to admit. What survives? When the quills are put down, Hürrem Sultan never ruled from a throne. That fact alone is why history keeps tripping over itself trying to explain her. She never led an army, never issued decrees in her own name, never sat crowned before courtiers, and yet for decades the Ottoman Empire bent around her presence. This is the part the chroniclers hate most, because it means power does not always look like command. Sometimes it looks like endurance. After Mustafa's death, after the court's outrage calcifies into legend, Hürrem retreats, not into irrelevance, but into structure. She focuses on what cannot be erased as easily as rumor. She builds mosques, hospitals, public kitchens that feed the poor daily, schools, not as charity for applause, but as permanence. Stone outlives slander. Infrastructure outlasts opinion. Long after the men who cursed her name rot into dust, people will still eat because of her decisions. This is not softness, it is legacy strategy. She ensures her sons are educated not just as princes but as rulers, trained in restraint, administration, and survival. She understands that brute force keeps a throne briefly, systems keep it longer, and when her sons die, one by one, as imperial sons so often do, she absorbs grief without theatrics, because grief too can be weaponized against you. By the end of her life, Hürrem is both feared and indispensable. The court no longer challenges her openly, not because they respect her, but because they understand her reach. She has outlived enemies who underestimated her as a novelty. She has outlasted rivals who relied on tradition alone. She has reshaped the very rules that once threatened to erase her. When she dies in 1558, the empire does not collapse. Suleiman mourns her deeply, publicly, in letters that historians cannot dismiss as rumor. He orders her burial near his own, another unprecedented honor. And yet the narrative machine does not stop. They will remember her as dangerous, they will remember her as foreign, they will remember her as disruptive, they will not remember her as inevitable. But here is the truth that survives every attempt to bury it. Hürrem Sultan did not corrupt the Ottoman Empire. She exposed how it already worked. She proved that intelligence can outrun lineage, that adaptation can defeat tradition, that a woman denied power can still learn to wield it, and perhaps most unsettling of all, she showed that empires are not toppled by seduction or whispers. They are shaped by the people who understand their weaknesses best. Hürrem began life as property. She ended it as precedent, and every historian who hated her knew exactly why. Because if a stolen girl could rise, adapt, and win, then power was never as exclusive as they wanted to believe, and that idea is far more dangerous than any woman in silk ever could be. Why they could never forgive her. After Hürrem Sultan's death, something curious happens. The empire keeps functioning. The laws she helped stabilize remain in place. The charitable institutions she built continue feeding people. The the diplomatic balance she supported holds, at least for a time. In other words, her absence does not create chaos, and that is precisely the problem. Because if Hurrem were truly the corrupting force the chroniclers claimed, her death should have fixed everything. The empire should have breathed easier. Tradition should have snapped back into place. It doesn't, which means the accusations no longer make sense. So history adjusts the story. They stop focusing on what she did and start obsessing over who she was supposed to be. They turn her into a cautionary tale, the dangerous woman who interfered with men's affairs, the wife who disrupted ancient customs, the foreigner who poisoned the court. Notice the pattern? They don't accuse her of incompetence. They don't accuse her of failure. They accuse her of influence, because influence is the one form of power men have never been comfortable admitting women could master without permission. Hurrem's real crime was not ambition. It was success without apology. She never pretended to be a passive ornament. She never cloaked her intelligence in false humility. She never played the role history wanted her to play: a disposable concubine, a quiet mother, a temporary presence. She insisted on permanence. And permanence, when claimed by a woman who began life as a slave, threatens every hierarchy built on birthright and gender. So the pens sharpened. European writers exoticized her. Ottoman chroniclers minimized her achievements. Later, historians recycled the same tropes with more polish and fewer questions. Seductress, schemer, corrupting influence. Because if she were anything else, if she were recognized as what she truly was, then the entire architecture of power would look fragile. And power hates mirrors. The girl who learned to run the machine. Here is the ending history never gives her. Hurrem Sultan was not exceptional because she was ruthless. She was exceptional because she understood systems. She entered one of the most rigid hierarchies in the world at the very bottom and learned how it actually functioned, not how it claimed to function. She observed where decisions were made, who influenced them, how tradition could be bent without breaking, and how patience could outlast brute force. She did not overthrow the Ottoman Empire, she inhabited it. And that is far more unsettling because revolutions can be dismissed as chaos, but adaptation proves the rules were never as fixed as advertised. Hurrem's life reminds us of an uncomfortable truth. Power does not always announce itself. Sometimes it learns, sometimes it waits, sometimes it laughs softly, while everyone else mistakes restraint for weakness. She was kidnapped, enslaved, renamed, stripped of origin, family, faith, freedom. And still she became indispensable, not because the empire was kind, not because Suleiman was merciful, but because she refused to accept the role assigned to her. That is why she is remembered with such venom, because she proves something every empire fears, that the people it builds itself upon are not always the ones who obey best, but the ones who understand it deeply enough to survive it. Hurrem Sultan did not conquer with armies, she conquered with clarity. And long after the quills ran out of ink, long after the men who hated her faded into footnotes, her lesson remains: if the world tries to turn you into a warning, make yourself into a precedent instead. That is the legacy of ROXELANA, not a seductress, not a witch, not a scandal in silk, but a woman who looked at the most powerful machine of her time and learned how to make it answer to her.
And that's where we leave her, on the page, in the archive, in the rumor, in the shadow she carved into history. Maybe she was a villain. Maybe she was a victim. Maybe she was something far more dangerous, a woman who refused the role she was handed. But one thing is certain: the world wasn't ready for her then, and it still isn't now. If you enjoyed falling down this rabbit hole of power, defiance, and the women history tried to bury, make sure you're here for the next chapter, because there are more of them, more rebels, more survivors, more legends disguised as scandals. Until next time, keep questioning the stories you were told, and keep an eye on the women they warned you about.